Thank you for joining me for another reading through the New Testament. We are in 1 Corinthians chapter 7 today. Now concerning the matters about which you wrote, it is good for a man not to have sexual relations with a woman. But because of the temptation to sexual immorality, each man should have his own wife, and each woman her own husband. The husband should give to his wife her conjugal rights, and likewise the wife to her husband. For the wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does. Likewise, the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. Do not deprive one another, except perhaps by agreement for a limited time, that you may devote yourselves to prayer, but then come together again, so that Satan may not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. Now as a concession, not a command, I say this: I wish that all were as myself. But each has his own gift from God, one of one kind and one of another. To the unmarried and to the widows I say this, that it is good for them to remain single as I am. But if they cannot exercise self-control, they should marry, for it is better to marry than to burn with passion. To the married I give this charge, not I but the Lord. The wife should not separate from her husband. But if she does, she should remain unmarried or else be reconciled to her husband, and the husband should not divorce his wife. To the rest I say, I, not the Lord, that if any brother has a wife who is an unbeliever, and she consents to live with him, he should not divorce her. If any woman has a husband who is an unbeliever, and he consents to live with her, she should not divorce him. For the unbelieving husband is made holy because of his wife, and the unbelieving wife is made holy because of her husband. Otherwise, your children would be clean, but as it is, they are holy. But if the unbelieving partner separates, let it be so. In such cases, the brother or sister is not enslaved. God has called you to peace. For how do you know, wife, whether you will save your husband, or how do you know, husband, whether you will save your wife? Only let each person lead the life that the Lord has assigned to him, and to which God has called them. This is my rule in all the churches. Was anyone at the time of his call already circumcised? Well, let him not seek to remove the marks of circumcision. Was anyone at this time of his call uncircumcised? Well, let him not seek circumcision. For neither circumcision counts for anything nor uncircumcision, but keeping God's commands. Each one should remain in the condition in which he was called. Were you a bondservant when you were called? Do not be concerned about it, but if you can gain your freedom, avail yourself of the opportunity. For he who is called in the Lord as a bondservant is a freedman of the Lord. Likewise, he who is free when called is a bondservant of Christ. You were bought with a price. Do not become bondslaves of men. So, brothers, in whatever condition each was called, there let him remain with God. Now, concerning the betrothed, I have no command from the Lord, but I give my judgment as one who by the Lord's mercy is trustworthy. I think that in view of the present distress, it is good for a person to remain as he is. Are you bound to a wife? Do not seek to be free. Are you free from a wife? Do not seek a wife. But if you do marry, you have not sinned, and if a betrothed woman marries, she has not sinned. Yet those who marry will have worldly troubles, and I would spare you that. This is what I mean, brothers. The appointed time has grown very short. From now on, let those who have wives live as though they had none, and those who mourn as though they were not mourning, and those who rejoice as though they were not rejoicing, and those who buy as though they had no goods, and those who deal with the world as though they had no dealings with it. For the present form of this world passes away. I want you to be free from anxieties. The unmarried man is anxious about the things of the Lord, how to please the Lord, but the married man is anxious about worldly things, how to please his wife, and his interests are divided. And the unmarried or betrothed woman is anxious about the things of the Lord, how to be holy in body and spirit. But the married woman is anxious about worldly things, how to please her husband. I say this for your own benefit, not to lay any restraint upon you, but to promote good order and to secure your undivided devotions to the Lord. If anyone thinks that he is not behaving properly toward his betrothed, if his passions are strong, and it has to be, let him do as he wishes. Let him marry. It is no sin. But whoever is firmly established in his heart, being under no necessity, but having his desire under control, and has determined this in his heart to keep her as his betrothed, he will do well. So then he who marries his betrothed does well, and he who refrains from marriage will do even better. A wife is bound to her husband as long as he lives. But if her husband dies, she is free to be married to whom she wishes, only in the Lord. Yet in my judgment, she is happier if she remains as she is. And I think that I too have the Spirit of God. A long chapter about marriage, which is obviously prompted, as he said at the beginning of the chapter, by questions that the Corinthian church raised to him. Probably the most significant one was, is it better not to marry? Or making it really the statement, let me scan here to read it exactly as it says, it is good for a man not to have sexual relations with a woman. So that prompts many of these questions, or many of these answers from that one question. The question about if you're married and you need to stay married. If you've married a person who's not a believer, you are to stay married. If your unbeliever spouse departs from you and leaves you, you're not under bondage to pursue and to keep that relationship intact. But the point is you're to remain married. Then he talks about people who are unmarried. He talks about the person who's engaged and the person who is unengaged. And really, and then he speaks about the widow there at the very end. And it should be noted to understand that many of his answers he acknowledges are prompted, first of all, by he's someone that the Lord trusts. So his advice is welcomed by the Lord, and his advice should be welcomed by us. But it's still in the context of the present distress. His acknowledgement that as Christians in the first century, a ramping up of persecution, a ramping up of difficulties, that making a decision to not defy Jesus when the Caesar tells you to defy him will be a lot easier for the single man than it will be for the married man, because the married man will love his wife and love his children and be afraid for their safety if he will not concede, if that makes sense. So trying to transfer the applications that Paul makes in every situation described in chapter 7 in our lives today always seems problematic, but recognize there could come a time within our own culture where very much of those stern realities will be true for us. But you have to understand that the whole chapter is saying, stay married. Stay where you are. And if you're single and you believe you can withhold and maintain a celibate lifestyle, then that would be better for you as a Christian because of the current distress. Think on those things. Certainly if you have questions, you're welcome to email me about this very expanded discussion that would come from 1 Corinthians 7, and you can reach me at woodlandschurchofchrist@gmail.com. But thank you for joining me, and join me again for another reading through the New Testament to make your weekdays strong.